Question 1. Which of the following describes a situation where a behavior is followed immediately by the presentation of a stimulus, and as a result, the behavior occurs more often in the future? A. Positive punishment. B. Negative punishment. C. Positive reinforcement. D. Negative reinforcement. Answer C. Positive reinforcement. This question tests your understanding of positive reinforcement. The keywords are presentation of a stimulus, means something is added, and behavior occurs more often, meaning the behavior increased. Positive reinforcement is exactly that, adding something desirable after a behavior that makes that behavior happen more frequently later on. For example, if a child cleans their room, behavior, and you give them praise, added stimulus, and they start cleaning their room more often, that's positive reinforcement. Remember it this way. Positive means adding something, and reinforcement means the behavior increases. Question 2. A behavior analyst is tracking how long it takes a student to begin working after being given an instruction. What type of measurement are they using? A. Frequency. B. Duration. C. Latency. D. Inter-response time, IRT. Answer C. Latency. This question is about measurement, specifically latency. The key phrase is how long it takes a student to begin working after being given an instruction. Latency measures the time between the presentation of a stimulus, the instruction, and the start of the response, beginning to work. It's not about how often the behavior happens, frequency, or how long the behavior lasts, duration, but the delay before it starts. Think about when you tell a child to put on their shoes and you measure the time from your request until they first touch their shoes. That's latency. A simple tip. Latency is about the lateness of the response starting. Question 3. Which schedule of reinforcement produces a high, steady rate of responding with very few pauses? A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Variable interval, VI. Answer B. Variable ratio, VR. The concept here is schedules of reinforcement, specifically the effects of a variable ratio, VR, schedule. The clues are high, steady rate, and very few pauses. A VR schedule means reinforcement is delivered after an average number of responses, but the exact number changes each time. This unpredictability keeps the individual responding consistently because they never know exactly which response will get reinforced. Slot machines are a classic example. They pay out on a VR schedule, which is why people keep playing steadily. Keep in mind, variable schedules, VR and VI, tend to produce steadier responding than fixed schedules because they are unpredictable. Question 4. What is the primary goal of a functional behavior assessment, FBA? A. To teach replacement behaviors. B. To determine the function or purpose of a behavior. C. To implement punishment procedures. D. To diagnose a developmental disability. Answer B. To determine the function or purpose of a behavior. This question asks about the core purpose of a functional behavior assessment, FBA. The keyword is primary goal. An FBA is an investigative process used to figure out why a challenging behavior is happening, what the person is getting out of it or trying to communicate. It's not primarily about teaching new skills or implementing consequences, although the findings guide those steps later. Think of an FBA like being a detective, trying to understand the motive behind the behavior, example, seeking attention, escaping a task, getting something tangible, or automatic sensory feedback. Here's the takeaway. FBA is all about understanding the why, the function, before deciding what to do about a behavior. Question 5. Shaping involves reinforcing. A. The final target behavior only. B. Successive approximations of the target behavior. C. Any behavior other than the target behavior. D. Behaviors that occur at a low rate. Answer B. Successive approximations of the target behavior. This question defines the process of shaping. The key term is successive approximations. Shaping is a technique used to teach a new behavior by reinforcing small steps that get closer and closer to the final desired behavior. You don't wait for the perfect behavior to happen. Instead, you reward attempts that are moving in the right direction. For instance, teaching a child to say bubble, you might first reinforce any sound buh, then bub, and finally the full word bubble. Think of it like sculpting clay. You gradually shape it into the final form. Remember, shaping is about rewarding the steps towards the goal, not just the final product. Question 6. During a session, a behavior technician praises a child each time they correctly identify a picture card. This is an example of A. Discrete trial training, DTT. B. Natural environment teaching, NET. C. Extinction, D. Punishment. Answer A. Discrete trial training, DTT. This scenario describes discrete trial training, DTT, a structured teaching method. The key elements are the distinct steps. The technician presents a specific stimulus, picture card. The child responds, identifies it, and the technician provides immediate feedback/reinforcement, praise. DTT breaks skills down into small, manageable steps that are taught systematically, often in a structured setting. It's different from NET, which occurs in more natural contexts. Imagine teaching colors by holding up a red card, asking, "What color?" waiting for the response, "Red," and then saying, "Great job." That's a discrete trial. Quick tip. DTT is structured teaching with clear beginnings and ends for each learning opportunity. Question 7. Which of the following is not considered one of the 4 main functions of behavior? A. Sensory/automatic reinforcement. B. Escape/avoidance. C. Attention. D. Punishment. Answer D. Punishment. This question tests your knowledge of the 4 common functions of behavior. The key is identifying which option is not a function. The 4 widely accepted functions explain why behavior occurs: seeking attention, accessing tangibles/activities, escaping or avoiding something unpleasant, or getting automatic/sensory reinforcement. It feels good internally. Punishment is a consequence that decreases behavior. It's not a reason why a behavior happens in the first place, its function. A handy acronym to remember the functions is SEAT. Sensory, escape, attention, tangible. Punishment isn't part of SEAT. Question 8. A teacher removes a token from a student's board each time they call out without raising their hand. The student's calling out behavior decreases. This is an example of A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer D. Negative punishment. This question describes negative punishment, specifically response cost. The keywords are removes a token. Something desirable is taken away, and behavior decreases. Negative punishment occurs when removing something preferred or valuable after a behavior results in that behavior happening less often in the future. Taking away the token contingent on calling out made the calling out decrease. Think about losing privileges, like screen time, for breaking a rule. If that makes you break the rule less often, it's negative punishment. Remember, negative means taking something away, and punishment means the behavior decreases. Question 9. Recording every instance of a target behavior during a specific observation period is called A. Interval recording. B. Time sampling. C. Event recording. Frequency. D. Duration recording. Answer C. Event recording. Frequency. This question defines event recording, also known as frequency recording. The key phrase is recording every instance. Event recording is a measurement method where you simply tally or count each time the behavior occurs within your observation time. It's best used for behaviors that have a clear beginning and end and don't happen so quickly that you lose count. For example, counting the number of times a student raises their hand during a 30-minute class is event recording. Easy way to think about it. Event recording counts the events each time the behavior happens. Question 10. Which type of preference assessment involves presenting pairs of stimuli to an individual and recording which one they choose? A. Multiple stimulus without replacement, MSWO. B. Single stimulus, successive choice. C. Paired stimulus, forced choice. D. Free operant observation. Answer: C. Paired stimulus, forced choice. The concept here is preference assessment methods, specifically the paired stimulus or forced choice method. The clue is presenting pairs of stimuli. In this method, you show the individual 2 items at a time and ask them to pick one. You repeat this with different combinations of items to create a hierarchy of preferred items based on how often each item was chosen when presented. Imagine offering a child a choice between a toy car and a cookie, then a toy car and a book, then a cookie and a book, recording their choice each time. Remember, paired stimulus assessment means items are presented in pairs. Question 11. Behavior analysts must obtain informed consent before starting assessment or treatment. Informed consent means the individual, or guardian, A. has been told about the procedures and agrees voluntarily. B. has signed a form without needing details. C. is legally required to participate. D. can never withdraw from the service. Answer: A. has been told about the procedures and agrees voluntarily. This question touches on the ethical requirement of informed consent. The key idea is what constitutes informed consent. It means the person, or their legal guardian, must fully understand what the assessment or treatment involves, including potential risks and benefits, alternative options, and their right to withdraw, and must agree to it freely, without pressure. Just signing a form isn't enough if the person wasn't truly informed. Consent must be voluntary and can be withdrawn at any time. Think of it like before a medical procedure. The doctor explains everything before you agree. Takeaway: informed consent means the person knows what they're agreeing to and does so willingly. Question 12. When a previously reinforced behavior no longer receives reinforcement and its frequency decreases, this process is called A. punishment. B. shaping. C. extinction. D. negative reinforcement. Answer: C. extinction. This question defines extinction. The key elements are previously reinforced behavior, no longer receives reinforcement, and frequency decreases. Extinction occurs when you stop reinforcing a behavior that used to be reinforced, leading to a gradual reduction in that behavior. For example, if a child whines to get cookies, and this used to work, and the parent stops giving cookies for whining, the whining should eventually decrease through extinction. It's important to remember extinction isn't ignoring, unless attention was the reinforcer. It's withholding the specific reinforcer that was maintaining the behavior. Quick tip: extinction means the reinforcement that kept the behavior going has been extinguished or stopped. Question 13. A graph that shows the total number of behaviors that have occurred up to a certain point in time is called A. line graph. B. bar graph. C. scatter plot. D. cumulative record. Answer: D. cumulative record. This question is about types of graphs used in ABA, specifically the cumulative record. The defining feature is showing the total number of behaviors up to a certain point. A cumulative record always shows the sum of responses over time. The line only goes up or stays flat, it never goes down. Each point on the graph represents the total number of responses recorded since the start of data collection. Steeper slopes indicate higher rates of responding. Think of it like tracking the total miles you've run over a month. The number always increases or stays the same each day you record it. Key feature. Cumulative records accumulate the responses over time. Question 14. Providing reinforcement for behaving in a way that is physically incompatible with an unwanted behavior is called A. Differential reinforcement of other behavior. DRO. B. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. DRA. C. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. DRI. D. Differential reinforcement of low rates. DRL. Answer C. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. DRI. This question focuses on differential reinforcement procedures, specifically DRI. The keyword is incompatible. DRI involves reinforcing a specific behavior that cannot physically occur at the same time as the problem behavior you want to reduce. For example, if a child often hits others, you might reinforce them for keeping their hands clasped together or in their pockets, behaviors incompatible with hitting. By reinforcing the incompatible behavior, you reduce the likelihood of the problem behavior occurring. Remember, I in DRI stands for incompatible. The replacement behavior makes the problem behavior impossible to do simultaneously. Question 15. What does the term baseline refer to in behavior analysis? A. The phase after treatment has started. B. The measurement of the behavior before intervention begins. C. The target level for the behavior. D. The reinforcement schedule used. Answer B. The measurement of the behavior before intervention begins. This question defines the term baseline in the context of behavioral assessment and intervention. The key phrase is before intervention begins. Baseline data represents the natural level of the target behavior before any treatment or intervention is introduced. It serves as a benchmark or comparison point to see if the intervention actually works. It causes a change in the behavior from its baseline level. If you want to increase a child's hand raising, you first count how often they raise their hand before starting any teaching or reward system. That's the baseline. Takeaway. Baseline is the before picture of the behavior. Question 16. Teaching a complex skill by breaking it down into smaller teachable steps and teaching them in sequence is known as A. Shaping. B. Chaining. C. Prompting. D. Modeling. Answer B. Chaining. The concept here is chaining, a method for teaching multi-step skills. The keywords are breaking it down into smaller teachable steps and teaching them in sequence. Chaining involves linking these individual steps together to form a complex behavior sequence. Examples include washing hands, tying shoes, or making a sandwich. Each involves multiple steps performed in a specific order. Shaping focuses on refining a single response, while chaining links multiple distinct responses together. Think of it like linking the cars of a train together to form the whole train. Key idea. Chaining connects steps in a sequence. Question 17. An antecedent stimulus that signals the availability of reinforcement for a particular response is called a HIN. A. Motivating operation, MO. B. Unconditioned stimulus, UCS. C. Discriminative stimulus, SD. D. Consequence. Answer C. Discriminative stimulus, SD. This question defines a discriminative stimulus, SD. The key elements are antecedent stimulus, comes before the behavior, and signals the availability of reinforcement. An SD is like a cue or signal that tells the individual that if they perform a specific behavior now, it's likely to be reinforced. For example, a green traffic light is an SD for pressing the gas pedal because it signals reinforcement. Moving forward safely is available for that behavior. The presence of your favorite coffee shop sign might be an SD for ordering coffee because it signals coffee, reinforcer, is available there. Remember, An SD signals when to respond to get reinforcement. Question 18. Which measurement method involves checking whether a behavior occurred at any point during a series of continuous intervals? A. Whole interval recording. B. Partial interval recording. C. Momentary time sampling. D. Frequency recording. Answer B. Partial interval recording. This question describes partial interval recording. The key phrase is occurred at any point during the interval. In partial interval recording, you divide the observation period into smaller, equal intervals. You then record whether the target behavior happened at least once during each interval. It doesn't matter how many times it occurred, or for how long, just whether it happened at all within that interval window. This method is often used for behaviors you want to decrease and tends to overestimate the occurrence of the behavior. For example, checking every 2 minutes if a student was out of their seat at any time during that 2-minute block. Tip: partial means the behavior only needs to occur for part of the interval, or at least once. Question 19. A child asks for a toy car by saying, "Car, please." This is an example of which verbal operant? A. Tact. B. Mand. C. Etroic. D. Intraverbal. Answer B. Mand. This question tests your understanding of verbal operants, specifically the mand. The key indicator is that the child is asking for something. Car, please. A mand is essentially a request, demand, or command. It's controlled by a motivating operation. The child wants the car, and leads to specific reinforcement, getting the car. It's different from a tact, labeling something present, an etoic, repeating what was heard, or an intraverbal, responding to someone else's words, like answering a question. Think of it this way. A mand is when you demand or ask for something you want. Question 20. Which ethical principle requires behavior analysts to provide services only within the boundaries of their education, training, and supervised experience? A. Confidentiality. B. Integrity. C. Competence. D. Responsibility. Answer C. Competence. This question relates to ethical guidelines, focusing on competence. The key phrase is provide services only within the boundaries of their education, training, and supervised experience. The principle of competence means behavior analysts must only practice in areas where they have the necessary skills and knowledge. If faced with a situation outside their expertise, they should seek supervision, training, or refer the client to someone qualified. It's about knowing your limits and not trying to do things you aren't trained for. Think of it like a heart surgeon not attempting brain surgery. They stick to their area of competence. Takeaway: competence means only doing what you know how to do well and ethically. Question 21. Observing a behavior in the setting where it typically occurs without manipulating any variables is called A. Functional analysis. B. Direct descriptive assessment. C. Indirect assessment. D. Preference assessment. Answer B. Direct descriptive assessment. This question describes direct descriptive assessment, a component of FBA. The key elements are observing a behavior in the setting where it typically occurs, and without manipulating any variables. This involves watching the individual in their natural environment, like home or school, and recording information about the behavior, its antecedents, what happened before, and its consequences, what happened after, as they naturally unfold. It's different from indirect assessment, interviews, checklists, and functional analysis, systematically manipulating variables. Think of it as being a fly on the wall, just watching and recording what happens naturally. Tip: direct means you're watching the behavior yourself, and descriptive means you're just describing what you see. Question 22. Reinforcement provided contingent on the absence of the target behavior for a specified period is A. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DVAR. B. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI. C. Differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO. D. Differential reinforcement of low rates, DRL. Answer C. Differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO. This question defines differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO. The key phrase is absence of the target behavior. DRO involves delivering reinforcement if the problem behavior does not occur during a specific time interval. You are essentially reinforcing any behavior except the problem behavior, reinforcing the zero rate of the problem behavior. For example, if a child frequently shouts, you might give them a token every 5 minutes they go without shouting. Remember, the O in DRO can stand for other behavior, meaning you reinforce when the problem behavior is absent. Question 23. Which measurement method is most appropriate for behaviors that last for an extended period, like time spent reading? A. Frequency. B. Latency. C. Duration. D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer C. Duration. The concept here is choosing the right measurement system based on the behavior's characteristics. The key information is behaviors that last for an extended period. Duration recording measures the total amount of time a behavior occurs, from its start to its end. This is suitable for behaviors where the length of time they occur is the important factor, such as time on task, crying duration, or time spent engaging in an activity like reading. Frequency, how often, or latency, time to start, wouldn't capture the key dimension here. Think. Duration measures how long the behavior lasts. Question 24. An intervention plan should always include A. A punishment procedure. B. Objective definitions of target behaviors. C. At least 5 different reinforcers. D. Complex technical jargon. Answer B. Objective definitions of target behaviors. This question focuses on essential components of a behavior intervention plan, BAP. While elements like reinforcers are important, the most crucial starting point listed here is having objective definitions of target behaviors. This means clearly describing the behavior in observable and measurable terms, so anyone reading the plan knows exactly what behavior is being targeted. Without clear definitions, measurement and consistent implementation are impossible. For example, instead of aggression, define it as any instance of hitting, kicking, or biting another person. Takeaway: clear, objective definitions are the foundation of any good BAP. Question 25. A behavior analyst is teaching a child to tie their shoes. They physically guide the child's hands through each step. This is an example of what type of prompt? A. Gestural prompt. B. Verbal prompt. C. Physical prompt. D. Modeling prompt. Answer C. Physical prompt. This question asks about types of prompts, focusing on physical guidance. The keyword is physically guide. A physical prompt involves direct physical contact to help the learner perform the behavior correctly. This can range from full physical guidance, hand over hand, to partial physical guidance, a light touch. Guiding hands to tie shoes is a clear example of full physical prompting. Other prompts involve pointing, gestural, telling, verbal, or showing, modeling. Remember, physical prompts involve physical contact to guide the response. Question 26. What does maintenance refer to in skill acquisition? A. Teaching the skill for the first time. B. The learner continuing to perform the skill after teaching has stopped. C. Using the skill in different settings. D. Teaching the skill very quickly. Answer B. The learner continuing to perform the skill after teaching has stopped. This question defines maintenance in the context of learning. The key phrase is continuing to perform the skill after teaching has stopped. Maintenance means that the learned behavior persists over time, even when the intensive teaching or frequent reinforcement schedule used during acquisition is no longer in place. It's about ensuring the skill lasts long-term. For example, if a student learns multiplication facts and can still recall them correctly months later without daily drills, they have maintained that skill. Takeaway: maintenance is about making sure the learned skills stick around. Question 27. Which of the following increases the value of a reinforcer? A. A discriminative stimulus, SD. B. An establishing operation, EO. C. An abolishing operation, AO. D. An S delta, S. Answer: B. An establishing operation, EO. This question is about motivating operations, MOs, specifically establishing operations, EOs. The key function described is increases the value of a reinforcer. An EO is an environmental event or condition that temporarily makes a particular stimulus more reinforcing, increases its value, and evokes behavior that has produced that reinforcer in the past. For example, being thirsty, EO, increases the value of water, reinforcer, and makes you more likely to ask for or seek water. An abolishing operation, AO, does the opposite. It decreases the reinforcer's value. Remember, establishing operations establish the value or effectiveness of a reinforcer. Question 28. Seeing a picture of a cat and saying cat is an example of which verbal operant? A. Manned. B. Tact. C. Echoic. D. Intraverbal. Answer: B. Tact. This question tests your knowledge of verbal operants, focusing on the tact. The key elements are seeing a picture of a cat, a nonverbal stimulus is present, and saying cat. A tact is essentially labeling or naming something in the environment that you perceive through your senses: see, hear, smell, taste, touch. It's controlled by the nonverbal stimulus, the picture, and maintained by generalized conditioned reinforcement, like praise or acknowledgement. It's different from a manned, requesting, or echoic, repeating, think. You make contact with the environment through your senses and then tact, label, it. Question 29. Which FBA method involves experimentally manipulating antecedents and consequences to determine the function of behavior? A. Indirect assessment example interviews. B. Direct descriptive assessment, observation. C. Functional analysis, FA. D. Preference assessment. Answer: C. Functional analysis, FA. This question asks to identify the FBA method that involves experimentation. The keywords are experimentally manipulating antecedents and consequences. A functional analysis, FA, is the only FBA method where the consultant systematically changes conditions, antecedents, and consequences to test hypotheses about why the behavior is occurring. Different conditions, example attention, escape, alone, control, are set up to see under which condition the behavior increases, thus demonstrating its function. It's considered the most rigorous FBA method, think. Functional analysis involves analyzing the behavior under controlled experimental conditions. Question 30. Which of the following is an example of generalization? A. A child learns to say dog when seeing a picture of a dog in therapy. B. A child learns to say dog only when their therapist shows the picture. C. A child learns to say dog when seeing a picture of a dog, and then also says dog when seeing a real dog in the park. D. A child stops saying dog after reinforcement is removed. Answer: C. A child learns to say dog when seeing a picture of a dog, and then also says dog when seeing a real dog in the park. This question defines generalization, specifically stimulus generalization. The key idea is the behavior occurring under different conditions than the original teaching condition. Generalization means that a learned behavior occurs in the presence of stimuli that are different from, but similar to, the stimulus used during training. Learning to label a dog from a picture, training stimulus, and then correctly labeling a real dog, different stimulus, shows the skill has generalized. Takeaway. Generalization means the learning spreads to new situations, people, or stimuli. Question 31. In behavior analysis, environment refers to A. Only the physical setting where behavior occurs. B. Only the social interactions a person has. C. The conglomerate of real circumstances in which the organism exists. Behavior cannot occur in the absence of environment. D. Only the internal thoughts and feelings of a person. Answer C. The conglomerate of real circumstances in which the organism exists. Behavior cannot occur in the absence of environment. This question asks for the behavior analytic definition of environment. The key is understanding its broad scope. In ABA, the environment includes everything except the moving parts of the organism involved in the behavior itself. This encompasses not just the physical setting, but also internal events, like being hungry or in pain, and external events, like sounds, people, temperature, light, that can influence behavior. It's the entire context in which behavior happens. Think. The environment is everything that can potentially affect behavior. Question 32. A scatterplot analysis in FBA is used primarily to identify A. The specific function of the behavior. B. Potential relationships between behavior and time of day or activities. C. The intensity of the behavior. D. The duration of the behavior. Answer B. Potential relationships between behavior and time of day or activities. This question is about the use of a scatterplot in a functional behavior assessment. The key purpose of a scatterplot is to find patterns related to when the behavior occurs. It's a grid where time intervals, like 30-minute blocks across the day, are marked if the behavior occurred during that time. By looking at the filled-in grid over several days, you can see if the behavior clusters around certain times, activities, or settings. Example, always happens before lunch or during math class. This helps narrow down potential triggers or functions, but doesn't definitively identify the function itself. Tip: think of a scatterplot as mapping the behavior across time to see patterns. Question 33. Forward chaining involves A. Teaching all the steps of the chain simultaneously. B. Teaching the last step of the chain first. C. Teaching the first step of the chain first, then the first and second, and so on. D. Reinforcing only the final completed chain. Answer C. Teaching the first step of the chain first, then the first and second, and so on. This question defines forward chaining, a method for teaching behavioral chains. The key is starting with the first step. In forward chaining, you teach the learner to perform the initial step of the sequence independently. Once they master the first step, you teach them the first two steps together, then the first three, and continue adding steps in their natural order until the entire chain is learned. For hand washing, you first teach turning on the water, then turning on water plus getting hands wet, etc. Remember, forward chaining moves from the front, first step, of the chain to the end. Question 34. Which of the following best describes interresponse time, IRT? A. The time between the end of one response and the beginning of the next response. B. The total time a behavior occurs. C. The time between a direction and the start of the response. D. The number of times a behavior occurs. Answer A. The time between the end of one response and the beginning of the next response. This question asks for the definition of interresponse time, IRT. The key phrase is time between responses. IRT measures the duration that passes from the moment one instance of the behavior ends until the moment the next instance of the same behavior begins. It's used to understand how rapidly or slowly responses are occurring. For example, if someone is tapping their finger, the IRT is the time between one tap ending and the next tap starting. Don't confuse it with latency, time from stimulus to response, or duration, how long one response lasts. Tip: Inter-response time is the time in between responses. Question 35. When a learner repeats exactly what someone else said, this is an example of which verbal operant? A. Mand. B. Tact. C. Ekshok. D. Intraverbal. Answer C. Echoic. This question tests your ability to identify the echoic verbal operant. The defining characteristic is repeats exactly what someone else said. An echoic response is controlled by a verbal stimulus, what was heard, and the response has point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity with that stimulus. It sounds the same. Basically, it's vocal imitation or echoing. If you say cookie and the child says cookie, that's an echoic. Think. An echoic sounds like an echo. Question 36. A motivating operation that decreases the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer is called a establishing operation, EO. B. Abolishing operation, AO. C. Discriminative stimulus, SD. D. Conditioned stimulus, CS. Answer B. Abolishing operation, AO. This question focuses on motivating operations, MOs, specifically abolishing operations, AOs. The key function is decreases the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer. An AO is an environmental event or condition that temporarily makes a particular stimulus less reinforcing, decreases its value, and abates, reduces, behavior that has produced that reinforcer in the past. For example, having just eaten a large meal, AO, decreases the value of food, reinforcer, and makes you less likely to ask for or work for food. Remember, abolishing operations abolish or reduce the value of a reinforcer. Question 37. Which measurement method involves recording whether the behavior occurred at the very end of each interval? A. Partial interval recording. B. Whole interval recording. C. Momentary time sampling. D. Event recording. Answer C. Momentary time sampling. This question describes momentary time sampling. The key phrase is at the very end of each interval. In this method, you divide the observation period into intervals, but you only record whether the behavior is occurring at the precise moment the interval ends. It doesn't matter if the behavior happened earlier in the interval. This method is useful for continuous behaviors or when observing multiple individuals simultaneously. Imagine checking every 5 minutes if a student is seated right at the 5-minute mark. Tip: momentary means you only check at that specific moment the interval concludes. Question 38. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA, involves A. Reinforcing any behavior except the target problem behavior. B. Reinforcing a behavior that is physically incompatible with the problem behavior. C. Reinforcing a specific, appropriate behavior that serves the same function as the problem behavior. D. Reinforcing the problem behavior only when it occurs at low rates. Answer C. Reinforcing a specific, appropriate behavior that serves the same function as the problem behavior. This question defines differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA. The key elements are reinforcing a specific, appropriate behavior, and ideally one that serves the same function. DRA involves putting the problem behavior on extinction, or minimizing reinforcement for it, while reinforcing a desired alternative behavior. The alternative doesn't have to be incompatible, like in DRI, just different and more socially acceptable. For example, teaching a child to ask for a break, alternative behavior, instead of screaming to escape a task, problem behavior, if both serve the escape function. Remember, the AT in DRA stands for alternative behavior. Question 39. Which ethical guideline relates to protecting the privacy of clients and not disclosing identifiable information without consent? A. Competence. B. Integrity. C. Confidentiality. D. Effectiveness. Answer. C. Confidentiality. This question asks about the ethical principle of confidentiality. The key concept is protecting the privacy of clients and not disclosing identifiable information. Confidentiality is a core ethical duty requiring behavior analysts to keep client information private and secure, only sharing it when legally or ethically required or with the client's explicit consent. This includes records, assessment results, and even the identity of the client. Think of it like doctor-patient confidentiality. What's discussed stays private. Takeaway. Confidentiality means keeping client information secret and safe. Question 40. What is a potential unwanted effect of using extinction? A. The behavior immediately stops forever. B. An extinction burst, temporary increase in the behavior. C. The behavior generalizes to new settings. D. The learner immediately acquires a replacement skill. Answer. B. An extinction burst, temporary increase in the behavior. This question asks about potential side effects of extinction. While extinction aims to decrease behavior long-term, a common initial effect is an extinction burst. This means the behavior might temporarily get worse, increasing in frequency, intensity, or variability, right after extinction is implemented before it starts to decrease. The individual might also show frustration or aggression. For example, if you stop giving attention for whining, the whining might get louder or happen more often for a short period before it reduces. It's important to anticipate this and remain consistent with the extinction procedure. Tip: expect things might get a little worse before they get better when using extinction. That's the burst. Question 41. A token economy is a system where individuals earn tokens, generalized conditioned reinforcers, for desirable behaviors, which can later be exchanged for A. Punishment. B. Extinction. C. Backup reinforcers. D. Primary punishers. Answer. C. Backup reinforcers. This question defines a key component of a token economy. The core idea is earning tokens that are then exchanged for something else desirable. These desirable items or activities that the tokens can be cashed in for are called backup reinforcers. The tokens themselves have little inherent value, but they become reinforcing because they are associated with access to these backup items, example toys, privileges, edibles. Think of arcade tickets. Tokens that you exchange for prizes. Backup reinforcers. Key term. Tokens are traded for backup reinforcers. Question 42. Which type of prompt is considered the most intrusive? A. Verbal prompt. B. Gestural prompt. C. Full physical prompt. D. Modeling prompt. Answer. C. Full physical prompt. This question asks about the intrusiveness level of different prompts. Prompt intrusiveness refers to the degree of assistance provided, with more intrusive prompts involving more direct control over the learner's response. Full physical prompting, hand-over-hand guidance, is generally considered the most intrusive because it involves the most physical manipulation by the teacher. Less intrusive prompts include modeling, verbal cues, or gestures, which allow the learner more independence. The goal is generally to use the least intrusive prompt necessary and fade prompts as quickly as possible. Think, more physical help equals more intrusive. Question 43. Measuring the number of math problems completed correctly is an example of using what type of measurement? A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency or count. D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer. C. Frequency or count. The concept here is selecting the appropriate measurement dimension. The key information is number of math problems completed correctly. When you are counting how many times something happens or how many items are produced, you are using frequency or count measurement. It's a simple tally of occurrences or products. Duration, how long. latency, time to start, and IRT, time between, don't fit this scenario. Think. Frequency is for how many times or how many things. Question 44. Answering the question, what did you do at school today? Is an example of which verbal operant? A. Mand. B. Tact. C. Etchok. D. Intraverbal. Answer. D. Intraverbal. This question tests your identification of the intraverbal verbal operant. The key is that the response, what I did at school, is controlled by someone else's verbal behavior. The question, what did you do? And does not match it exactly, it's not an equacy. Intraverbals are essentially conversational responses, like answering questions, filling in blanks, or participating in discussions. There's no direct nonverbal stimulus controlling the response, like in a tact, think. Intraverbals occur within a verbal exchange or conversation. Question 45. Backward chaining involves A. Teaching the first step of the chain first. B. Teaching all the steps at the same time. C. Having the trainer complete all steps except the last one, which the learner performs, then the last two, and so on. D. Only reinforcing incompatible behaviors. Answer. C. Having the trainer complete all steps except the last one, which the learner performs, then the last two, and so on. This question defines backward chaining. The key is starting with the last step. In backward chaining, the teacher prompts the learner through all the steps except the final one. The learner independently completes the last step and receives reinforcement for the entire completed chain. Then, the teacher prompts through all steps except the last two, which the learner completes independently, and so on, moving backward through the chain. This method provides immediate reinforcement for completing the chain early in the process. Think. Backward chaining moves from the back, last step, of the chain to the front. Question 46. A stimulus that, prior to conditioning, evokes no response is called a in A. Unconditioned stimulus, UCS. B. Conditioned stimulus, CS. C. Neutral stimulus, NS. D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. Answer. C. Neutral stimulus, NS. This question relates to respondent, classical, conditioning principles, defining a neutral stimulus. The key phrase is prior to conditioning, evokes no response. A neutral stimulus is something in the environment that initially doesn't trigger the reflex or response you are interested in. Through pairing with an unconditioned stimulus, which naturally evokes a response, the neutral stimulus can become a conditioned stimulus, capable of evoking the response on its own. Before Pavlov paired the bell with food, the bell was a neutral stimulus regarding salivation. Tip. A neutral stimulus starts out having no effect. Question 47. Presenting multiple stimuli, example 5 to 7 items, in an array and asking the individual to choose one, then removing the chosen item and rearranging the array for the next trial, describes which preference assessment? A. Paired stimulus, forced choice. B. Multiple stimulus without replacement, MSWO. C. Single stimulus, successive choice. D. Free operant observation. Answer. B. Multiple stimulus without replacement, MSWO. This question describes the multiple stimulus without replacement, MSWO, preference assessment method. The key elements are presenting multiple stimuli in an array. The individual chooses one, and the chosen item is removed before the next trial. This process continues until all items are chosen or the individual stops choosing. The order in which items are picked indicates their relative preference. It's efficient for identifying multiple preferred items quickly. Remember, without replacement means the chosen item is not put back into the array for the next pick in that session. Question 48. Which of the following is a critical feature of a good behavioral definition? A. It includes subjective interpretations of the behavior. B. It is objective, clear, and complete. C. It focuses only on the presumed function of the behavior. D. It is written in complex, technical terms. Answer B. It is objective, clear, and complete. This question asks about the characteristics of a high-quality behavioral definition. The key requirement is that definitions must be objective, clear, and complete. Objective means referring only to observable characteristics of the behavior. Clear means unambiguous, readable, and easily understood. Complete means setting boundaries so discrimination between what is and isn't an instance of the behavior is possible. Subjectivity, jargon, and focusing only on function make a definition poor. Think. A good definition allows anyone to observe and reliably agree on whether the behavior occurred. Question 49. Gradually removing prompts as the learner becomes more proficient with the skill is called A. Shaping. B. Chaining. C. Prompt fading. D. Extinction. Answer C. Prompt fading. This question defines prompt fading. The keywords are gradually removing prompts. Prompt fading is the systematic process of reducing the intrusiveness or frequency of prompts used to elicit a behavior. The goal is to transfer stimulus control from the prompt to the natural antecedent stimulus, the SD, so the learner can perform the skill independently. This might involve moving from physical to gestural prompts, reducing the volume of a verbal prompt, or increasing the time delay before giving a prompt. Think. Fading is like turning down the volume on the help until it's gone. Question 50. If a behavior occurs more frequently in the presence of a specific stimulus because it has been reinforced in the presence of that stimulus, the behavior is said to be under A. Extinction control. B. Punishment control. C. Stimulus control. D. Respondent control. Answer C. Stimulus control. This question defines stimulus control. The key elements are the behavior occurring more frequently in the presence of a specific stimulus because of past reinforcement in the presence of that stimulus. Stimulus control exists when the rate, latency, duration, or amplitude of a behavior is altered by the presence or absence of an antecedent stimulus, like an SD. The stimulus signals that reinforcement is available for that behavior, making the behavior more likely when the stimulus is present. For example, your phone ringing, stimulus, has stimulus control over your behavior of answering it because answering has been reinforced in the past when it rings. Takeaway. Stimulus control means a specific stimulus controls when the behavior occurs. Question 51. Which schedule of reinforcement involves providing reinforcement for the first response after a specific amount of time has passed? A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Variable interval, VI. Answer C. Fixed interval, FI. This question describes a fixed interval, FI, schedule of reinforcement. The key elements are reinforcement for the first response after a specific amount of time has passed. In an FI schedule, a set amount of time must elapse before the next response will be reinforced. Any responses during the interval don't count towards reinforcement. This schedule often produces a scallop pattern of responding. A pause after reinforcement, followed by a gradual increase in responding as the end of the interval nears. Think of checking your mail around the same time each day. You don't get reinforced. Get mail until the specific time interval, delivery time, has passed. Remember, fixed means the time is set, interval refers to time. Question 52. Reinforcing progressively lower rates of behavior is known as A. Differential reinforcement of other behavior, DRO. B. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA. C. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRI. D. Differential reinforcement of low rates, DRL. Answer D. Differential reinforcement of low rates. DRL. This question defines differential reinforcement of low rates, DRL. The key phrase is reinforcing progressively lower rates of behavior. DRL is used when the goal is not to eliminate a behavior entirely, but to reduce its frequency to an acceptable level. Reinforcement is delivered if the behavior occurs at or below a specified rate during a certain time period. For example, reinforcing a student if they ask questions no more than 3 times during a class period. Remember, the L in DRL stands for low rates. You want the behavior to happen less often, but not necessarily stop completely. Question 53. A behavior analyst explains the potential risks and benefits of a proposed intervention to a client's parents and ensures they understand before they agree to proceed. This relates primarily to which ethical principle? A. Competence. B. Informed consent. C. Confidentiality. D. Boundaries of competence. Answer B. Informed consent. This scenario directly illustrates the ethical principle of informed consent. The key actions are explains potential risks and benefits and ensures they understand before they agree. As discussed earlier, Q11. Informed consent requires providing all relevant information about a proposed service in understandable language so the client or guardian can make a voluntary and knowledgeable decision about participation. Competence is about the analyst's skills and confidentiality is about privacy. Takeaway. Informed consent is about making sure people know what they are signing up for. Question 54. Which of the following is an example of negative reinforcement? A. Giving a child a sticker for finishing homework, leading to more finished homework. B. Taking away a chore when a child gets good grades, leading to more good grades. C. Yelling at a driver who cuts you off, making them less likely to cut people off. D. A child losing TV time for hitting, resulting in less hitting. Answer B. Taking away a chore when a child gets good grades, leading to more good grades. This question asks for an example of negative reinforcement. The key elements of negative reinforcement are: a behavior occurs, an aversive, unpleasant, stimulus is removed or avoided as a consequence, and the behavior increases in the future. In option B, getting good grades, behavior, leads to the removal of an unpleasant stimulus, chores, and this results in more good grades, behavior increases. Option A is positive reinforcement, option D is negative punishment, and option C is likely positive punishment if it decreases the other driver's cutting off behavior. Remember, negative means something is removed. Reinforcement means behavior increases. Question 55. Observing a client in their natural environment and taking detailed notes on the behavior, antecedents, and consequences is part of A. Functional analysis, FA. B. Indirect FBA. C. Direct descriptive FBA. ABC recording. D. Preference assessment. Answer C. Direct descriptive FBA. ABC recording. This question describes a common method used in direct descriptive functional behavior assessment, FBA. The key elements are observing in their natural environment and taking notes on behavior, antecedents, and consequences. This is often referred to as ABC data collection. Antecedent behavior consequence. It involves directly observing the client and recording the events surrounding the target behavior as they naturally occur, without manipulating variables, unlike in FA. This helps generate hypotheses about the function. Remember, direct descriptive FBA involves directly observing and describing the ABC sequence. Question 56. The dead man's test is used to determine if something is a behavior. According to this test, if a dead man can do it, it underscore behavior. A. Is. B. Is not. C. Might be. D. Is the function of. Answer B. Is not. This question refers to the dead man's test, a common guideline for defining behavior. The rule is, if a dead man can do it, it isn't behavior. Behavior involves the actions of living organisms. Things like being quiet, not moving, or lying down can be done by a dead man, so they aren't behaviors in the technical sense, though they might be the absence of other behaviors. Real behaviors involve action, like talking, walking, or raising a hand. Takeaway: behavior requires action by a living organism. Question 57. The extent to which the results of an experiment can be generalized to other settings, populations, or behaviors is called A. Internal validity. B. External validity. C. Reliability. D. Treatment fidelity. Answer B. External validity. This question defines external validity in the context of research and intervention. The key phrase is generalized to other settings, populations, or behaviors. External validity refers to how well the findings of a study or intervention apply beyond the specific conditions under which it was conducted. High external validity means the results are likely relevant and applicable in different real-world situations. Internal validity, conversely, refers to the confidence that the intervention itself caused the observed change in behavior. Think. External validity relates to how well findings apply externally, outside the study. Question 58. A stimulus change that follows a behavior and decreases the future frequency of that behavior is called A. Reinforcement. B. Punishment. C. An antecedent. D. An MO. Answer B. Punishment. This question provides the basic definition of punishment. The key elements are follows a behavior, it's a consequence, and decreases the future frequency of that behavior. Punishment is defined by its effect on behavior. If the consequence makes the behavior happen less often later, it's functioning as punishment, regardless of whether it seems punishing in the everyday sense. This could involve adding something unpleasant, positive punishment, or removing something pleasant, negative punishment. Remember, punishment decreases behavior frequency. Question 59. Which verbal operant involves a response that is controlled by a verbal stimulus, where the response and the stimulus share point-to-point correspondence but not formal similarity? Example reading written text aloud. A. Echoic. B. Mand. C. Tact. D. Textual. Answer D. Textual. This question describes the textual verbal operant. The key features are control by a verbal stimulus, written words, point-to-point correspondence. The spoken words match the written words sequence, but no formal similarity. The stimulus is visual/written. The response is auditory/spoken. Reading aloud is the prime example. An echoic also has point-to-point correspondence, but does have formal similarity. Spoken stimulus, spoken response. Think. Textual behavior involves responding to written text. Question 60. During a DTT session, the instruction given by the therapist, such as touch red, is considered the A. Consequence. B. Response. C. Discriminative stimulus, SD. D. Reinforcer. Answer C. Discriminative stimulus, SD. This question asks you to identify the role of the instruction within a discrete trial training, DTT, framework. The instruction, touch red, comes before the desired response and signals that reinforcement example praise, is available for correctly touching red. Therefore, the instruction functions as the discriminative stimulus, SD, the cue to respond. The response is the learner touching red, and the consequence follows the response example praise or error correction. Remember, the SD is the signal or instruction that sets the occasion for the response. Question 61. Visually inspecting a graph of behavioral data to determine if changes in the intervention condition led to changes in behavior is called A. Statistical analysis. B. Functional analysis. C. Visual analysis. D. Component analysis. Answer C. Visual analysis. This question defines visual analysis, the primary method for evaluating data in behavior analysis. The key elements are visually inspecting a graph and determining if changes in intervention led to changes in behavior. Behavior analysts look for changes in level, average value, trend, direction of data path, and variability within and between different conditions, baseline versus intervention, on a graph to judge the effectiveness of an intervention. It relies on graphical display rather than statistical tests. Think. Visual analysis means looking at the graph to see what happened. Question 62. The process by which a behavior is followed by the removal, reduction, or postponement of an aversive stimulus, leading to an increase in the future frequency of that behavior, is A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer B. Negative reinforcement. This question provides a detailed definition of negative reinforcement. The key elements are removal, reduction, or postponement of an aversive stimulus. Something unpleasant is taken away or avoided, and an increase in the future frequency of the behavior that led to that removal/avoidance. Taking medicine to remove a headache or fastening your seatbelt to stop the annoying chime are examples. The behavior, taking medicine, fastening belt, increases because it gets rid of something bad. Remember the key components. Remove aversive plus behavior increases equals negative reinforcement. Question 63. A behavior contract is A. A method for preference assessment. B. A written agreement between two parties outlining specific behaviors and consequences. C. A type of functional analysis condition. D. A graph used to display data. Answer B. A written agreement between two parties outlining specific behaviors and consequences. This question defines a behavior contract, also called a contingency contract. The core components are a written agreement, involvement of two parties, example therapist and client, parent and childee, and outlining specific behaviors and consequences. The contract clearly states what behavior is expected from one party and what reinforcement, or penalty, will be provided by the other party contingent on that behavior. It increases accountability and makes the contingencies explicit. Think of it like a formal deal regarding behavior and rewards. Question 64. Which measurement method would be best for recording the number of times a student bites their nails during a class period? A. Duration recording. B. Latency recording. C. Event recording. Frequency. D. Momentary time sampling. Answer C. Event recording. Frequency. This question asks for the best measurement method for nail biting. Nail biting is typically a discrete behavior. It has a clear start and end that might happen multiple times. The question asks for the number of times it occurs. Therefore, event recording, counting each instance, frequency, is the most appropriate method. Duration might be hard to measure accurately. Latency isn't relevant, and time sampling might miss brief instances. Tip: if you want to know how often a distinct behavior happens, use frequency/event recording. Question 65. An antecedent intervention that involves altering the environment to reduce the likelihood that an undesirable behavior will occur is called A. Consequence manipulation. B. Environmental modification. Stimulus control manipulation. C. Extinction. D. Response cost. Answer B. Environmental modification. Stimulus control manipulation. This question describes antecedent interventions focused on changing the environment. The keywords are altering the environment and reduce the likelihood of the behavior before it happens. Environmental modification involves changing the physical or social setting to prevent the behavior or make a desired behavior more likely. Examples include removing triggers for problem behavior, example, moving fragile items out of reach, or adding prompts for desired behavior, example, putting a visual schedule up. It's about setting the stage for success. Takeaway: change the setup before the behavior happens to make good behavior easier. Question 66. Teaching a client to ask for help instead of screaming when work gets too hard is an example of A. DRO, differential reinforcement of other behavior. B. DGRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. C. DVRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. D. DRL, differential reinforcement of low rates. Answer: C. DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. This scenario illustrates differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, DRA. We are teaching a specific alternative behavior, asking for help, to replace the problem behavior, screaming. Asking for help is appropriate and likely serves the same function, escaping the difficult task, as screaming. It's not necessarily incompatible. One could potentially ask for help while starting to scream, though unlikely, and it's not reinforcing the absence of screaming. DRO, or a low rate, DRL. Remember, DRA teaches the specific alternative skill to replace the problem behavior. Question 67. The degree to which observers consistently agree on the occurrences and non-occurrences of observed behaviors is called A. Treatment fidelity. B. Inter-observer agreement, IOA. C. Internal validity. D. External validity. Answer: B. Inter-observer agreement, IOA. This question defines inter-observer agreement, IOA. The key phrase is observers consistently agree. IOA measures the reliability of behavioral data by having two or more independent observers record the same behavior simultaneously and then calculating the percentage of agreement between their recordings. High IOA increases confidence that the definition of the behavior is clear and the data collection is accurate. Think. IOA checks if different people agree on what they observed. Question 68. Which type of prompt involves the trainer demonstrating the desired behavior for the learner? A. Physical prompt. B. Verbal prompt. C. Gestural prompt. D. Modeling prompt. Answer: D. Modeling prompt. This question asks to identify the modeling prompt. The key action is the trainer demonstrating the desired behavior. Modeling involves showing the learner exactly what to do. For example, if teaching how to wave goodbye, the trainer would wave their hand first, and the learner would imitate. It's different from physically guiding, physical, telling, verbal, or pointing, gestural. Think. Modeling is showing the behavior. Question 69. A child learns to say thank you when given a toy, and this behavior is maintained by social praise like "you're welcome" or "good manners." The praise functions as A. An unconditioned reinforcer. B. A generalized conditioned reinforcer. C. A primary punisher. D. An antecedent stimulus. Answer: B. A generalized conditioned reinforcer. This question asks about the type of reinforcer maintaining the thank you. Social praise, like verbal acknowledgments, is typically a conditioned reinforcer. Its value is learned through association with other reinforcers. It's considered generalized because it has been paired with many different types of backup reinforcers: attention, access to items, escape from disapproval, and is effective across various situations and motivational states. It's not unconditioned, like food or warmth, and definitely not a punisher or antecedent. Think. Praise works in many situations because it's linked to many good things, making it a generalized conditioned reinforcer. Question 70. Which of the following is not a component of a basic line graph used in ABA? A. X-axis, usually time. B. Y-axis, usually level of behavior. C. Data points connected by lines. D. Pie chart representing percentages. Answer. D. Pie chart representing percentages. This question asks you to identify what is not typically part of a standard ABA line graph. Line graphs used to display behavioral data always include an x-axis, representing time, sessions, or days, a y-axis, representing the measured dimension of behavior, like frequency or duration, data points showing the level of behavior at specific time points, and lines connecting consecutive data points within a condition. Phase/condition change lines are also crucial. A pie chart is a different type of graph used to show proportions of a whole and is not a standard component of a behavior change line graph. Takeaway: line graphs show behavior change over time using axes, data points, and connecting lines. Question 71. If a client engages in behavior to get access to a preferred item or activity, the function is likely: A. Attention. B. Escape/avoidance. C. Tangible. D. Automatic/sensory. Answer. C. Tangible. This question asks you to identify the function of behavior when the goal is getting an item or activity. The keyword is access to a preferred item or activity. When the consequence maintaining the behavior is obtaining something physical, a toy, food, game, or a desired activity, the function is classified as tangible. This is one of the four main functions, C8. Sensory, escape, attention, tangible. Think. Tangible means you can touch or obtain the reinforcer or access an activity. Question 72. Which single-subject research design involves sequentially introducing an intervention across different baselines, example, different behaviors, settings, or subjects? A. Reversal, ABAB, design. B. Changing criterion design. C. Multiple baseline design. D. Alternating treatments design. Answer. C. Multiple baseline design. This question describes the multiple baseline design. The key feature is sequentially introducing an intervention across different baselines. In this design, you collect baseline data simultaneously on two or more behaviors, settings, or individuals. Then you introduce the intervention to the first baseline while keeping the others in baseline. Once behavior changes in the first baseline, you introduce the intervention to the second, and so on. Experimental control is shown if the behavior changes only when the intervention is applied to that specific baseline. Think. Multiple baselines are targeted one after another. Question 73. The likelihood to recommend question in client satisfaction surveys is an example of gathering what type of information? A. Direct observation data. B. Functional analysis data. C. Social validity data. D. IOA data. Answer. C. Social validity data. This question relates to assessing the acceptability and importance of interventions, known as social validity. Asking about client satisfaction, whether goals are important, if procedures are acceptable, and if the outcomes made a meaningful difference are all ways to gather social validity information. The likelihood to recommend question gauges the overall satisfaction and perceived value of the service from the consumer's perspective. It's not direct behavior data, FA data, or reliability data, IOA. Think. Social validity checks if the intervention is socially acceptable and important. Question 74. Behavior is defined as A. Any internal thought or feeling. B. The actions or movements of a living organism. C. Only problematic actions that need changing. D. A diagnostic category. Answer. B. The actions or movements of a living organism. This question asks for the fundamental definition of behavior in behavior analysis. The key point is that behavior refers to anything a living organism does, any observable and measurable activity or movement. This includes primed events like thinking, viewed as covered behavior, but operationally focuses on actions that can be potentially observed and measured. It's not limited to problem behaviors or diagnostic labels. Think. Behavior is what organisms do. Question 75. A client is required to practice the correct way to ask for a break 5 times every time they whine to escape a task. This intervention technique is most likely an example of A. Extinction. B. Positive practice over correction. C. Negative reinforcement. D. Shaping. Answer B. Positive practice over correction. This scenario describes a form of overcorrection called positive practice. The key elements are engaging in the problem behavior, whining, followed by being required to practice the correct way multiple times. Positive practice over correction involves having the individual repeatedly practice a correct or more appropriate form of the behavior contingent on the occurrence of the inappropriate behavior. It serves as a punisher for the inappropriate behavior while also providing practice of the desired behavior. Remember, positive practice involves practicing the positive or correct behavior repeatedly.